heater! I dare you to hit it!
He'll be sorry.
Boy, a bigger bat.
Want the heater? I'll give it to
Pick
you.
up a basketball, maybe they don't hit it.
A swing and a drive to deep right.
Clear the deck. Cannonball coming.
Left field. It is out of here.
What up? What's good? Baseball Unstitched. We are back with another episode for you guys today. A little bit of an abbreviated episode with the holiday weekend as we are recording a few days early. But we're going to talk about a Cy Young candidate today, Flax and Chase Burns. Hot topic on Twitter. I believe it was Ohio Divided who mentioned it, not only to us, but many others who should probably be talking a little bit more about Chase Burns. We're then going to flip over to the Chicago Cubs. They are the epitome of hot, cold, hot, cold, hot, cold until you fall over because you can't say it anymore. There's a lot to talk about there, Flax. We will enjoy diving into that. But first, we start how we always start, or I guess kind of. Flax, how was golf today since it's Saturday and you haven't had your weekend?
Golf was good. I shot an even par round. Now, as good as that sounds, I did bogey 17 and 18 to shoot even par, but it two tough holes. I'm not mad about it. It was a good day. How was your Saturday?
Not bad. Been doing a lot around the house. Put up another light fixture. Put up some things outside. Just, you know, we're doing our thing over here.
Prepping and planning, I would assume, for a big trip?
Yes, we are. We're headed to Moab this weekend to go see the Arches and Canyonlands, which I'm very excited about. So
Candyland?
Candyland. We play in at the simulator. We will be driving 5+ hours tomorrow morning for that, and we are excited. So it'll be fun. No This Week in Baseball because it's Saturday, once again, a little bit early, so we'll move right into the pod here. This week, topic one, Flax, as mentioned, Chase Burns has been electric, and we've been told multiple times on Twitter that we should probably start talking about Chase Burns, so we did our research, we did our homework, watched him, dove into the data, and now we're here to talk about Chase Burns through 10 starts, granted, Cy Young Award candidacy, and if not this year, Flax, what he might need to do to solidify himself as a Cy Young Award candidate for years and years to come. Tell us a little bit more about Chase Burns.
Yeah, through 10 starts this year, he's 6-1, 59 innings pitched, a 1.83 ERA, a 2.86 expected ERA, a 3.39 FIP, a 3.17 expected FIP, a 0.95 WHIP, 28.2% K, 7.9% walk, and a 34.7% whiff, which is good for 94th percentile in baseball. Yeah, he throws the ball through the bat a lot.
It really does. I mean, that fastball is gross.
Yeah, and you and I, we dove into his Savant page a little bit and got a better understanding of his arsenal, and it's fascinating. It's very similar to another Reds arm in Hunter Green, very heavily reliant on basically just two pitches, a fastball and a slider. A really good slider, one of the best in baseball, and an extremely good fastball, one of the best in baseball, for multiple reasons. One, they both spin a ton. They're both thrown faster than normal, than hitters see. And for the most part, he does a good job of staying around the edges of the zone so that with those two pitches, so that it's hard for hitters to get good contact on the ball. One of the things I noticed, his contact on chase, so contact outside the zone, is up 10% from last year to this year. Last year to this year have a very similar sample size. What that tells me is that he's getting more contact on pitches outside the zone to lead to soft contact. Being in the middle of the zone generally leads to hard contact. Being on the edges generally leads to soft contact. Soft contact generally leads to success, which is what we're seeing.
Yeah, with guys like him, I think one of the things that I look at immediately, and you know this as well as I do, is the fact of the matter is that I wouldn't categorize Chase Burns as somebody who's consistently commanding his fastball, right? This is a fastball that's going to play almost anywhere in the zone, and he's one of the few guys who can get away with not executing his spot on a regular basis. However, to his credit, the walk rate for him already this year in a similar sample size to last year is down about 0.5%. I think that's really big for him, meaning he's not sitting here beating himself. The .95 whip is showing us that he's definitely in the zone and attacking aggressively in the zone much more from an overall perspective. What's so interesting about Chase Burns is, Flax, like you mentioned, he's doing this with 2 pitches. We've already discussed that it's hard to do this with 3 pitches. When we talked about Christopher Sanchez a few weeks back, we mentioned the fact that he was doing it with only 3 pitches as a starter, which is not something that's common at this point anymore. Burns doing it mainly in reality with 2 pitches. For those who don't know this already, he's thrown his changeup, his 3rd most thrown pitch, 55 times this year, only once to a righty, 55 times to a lefty, so 56 total. I apologize. What this is telling us is that versus right-handed hitters, you're seeing 2 things. That's it. In most cases, especially at lower levels of baseball, it's much easier to hit guys like this, right, Flax? Because you can anticipate one or the other. The only difference here is that at lower levels of baseball, people don't throw a 4-seam fastball that's 98 plus with 18.5 average inches of ride. It's really impressive. So I think what's crazier here, Flax, and this is what we really want to dive into, is this year Chase Burns has an opportunity to continue to do what he's doing until Major League Baseball adjusts to the way he is currently throwing. I think we're going to see this performance from him at bare minimum till at least the All-Star break, when teams have time to reset a little bit and try to take a different approach against Burns, and then in-division teams getting multiple opportunities to see him. Back half of the year, it will be very interesting to see if he can continue to do this. But there's so much room for Chase Burns to continue to grow, and it's something that we saw the Reds help Hunter Green do, and why we're seeing Hunter Green be so much more consistent as a 3-pitch pitcher. And I think that's what me and you want to dive into today, is how the Reds make this kid a perennial Cy Young Award candidate similar to Hunter Green.
Well, and I think, Hunter Green having added a splitter at year 3 tells you that, similarly to Chase Burns, guys who can spin the ball really well tend to have good feel in their hands, tend to have good feel with grips. It's one of those things where you have to take an off season and kind of mess around and touch and feel the baseball to the point where it's comfortable to try new things and have opportunities and spaces where you can try new things. I think fortunately and unfortunately for Hunter Green, he was also in a bit of a situation on the field with a team behind him that gave him a little bit more opportunity to mess around with some things in game. It wasn't a team that was always in, early on, pushing for the postseason, pushing for a division. Then once he started to figure that out and he elevated the level at which he was bringing to the table for that team, they got better as an organization. Now you're seeing Chase Burns in a position where he's got to kind of ride what works instead first.
Yep.
Before he figures it out. He doesn't necessarily have that flexibility, but the changeup doesn't seem to be a pitch he dislikes. It just seems to be a pitch that gets hit. And so then the question becomes, are we backing down on it enough from a miles per hour perspective against the fastball? Are we sequencing it appropriately with the fastball? And am I throwing it differently? Am I tipping it when I'm throwing it as opposed to the fastball? Because guys seem more comfortable. When you start to look at him giving up home runs, it tends to be similarly to most pitchers when hitters are ahead or in a 1-1 count and they can focus on one pitch over the middle of the plate that they're looking to get. It's sliders over the middle. It's fastballs over the middle. It's fastballs up, right? Josh Lowe hit a fastball up in the zone for a home run against Chase Burns. It was an 0-1 count. But as a lefty, and we talked about this, if my expectation is that I'm either going to get a back foot slider or I'm going to get a fastball up in the zone, I'm just going to cut the plate in half and look up in the zone until I get to 2 strikes. Not everybody takes advantage of it. Not everybody hits it well. And I think that's where you flip the conversation back and say, why, right? Why does it work for Chase Burns? Because this is something that can be sustainable for someone with the kind of stuff that he has, right? He can throw a slider out of the same slot as the fastball down in the zone and make it really hard for guys to even cut the plate in half, right? That's what good pitchers do. My curiosity will be what they end up trying to lean on improving, because I would suspect that adding a third pitch that he can throw 9 to 12% of the time, even on a show me basis, or I need to get out of a jam and I'm in a 9 pitch at bat where I've gone fastball slider, 8 of those 9 pitches, I'm going to break something else out here to just give the guy another look on a 2-2 pitch, right? That has to exist if you want to be a Cy Young level pitcher. Paul Skeens adds a new pitch every season.
Well, not everybody can be Paul Skeens, to be fair. And I think the big situation here, though, for Burns is there's 2 different things that they can employ, which I think are doable. One, the Reds have shown that they can teach somebody who has a similar type arsenal and similar type stuff how to throw a splitter, right? We saw that with Hunter Green. I think the splitter could be really effective for Burns because it's more apt to be thrown to both righties and lefties, which is going to help you have 2 different sides of the plate think about that pitch. The other thing that we talked about is, one, he has a curveball that he hasn't been throwing. This curveball does not have nearly as much dip or drop as the rest of the league. I believe on average it's 6.5 inches less of drop when he's thrown. He's thrown it once this year. I think he threw it like 6 times last year. I'm not asking him to bring that curveball back because I think the splitter actually solves your problem there because that can be thrown to righties and lefties. What we did see from him last year that we think we could see more of in the future is a sinker. He was throwing a sinker on a regular basis, 100 miles an hour. He threw, I think, 7 of them last year. He threw 5 or 6 of those to lefties. If you've listened to our podcast before, you already know that Flax and I do not believe unless you can physically and consistently command the inner half of the plate with a sinker against opposite-handed hitters. So for the case of Chase Burns, that would be right-handed pitching Chase Burns to left-handed hitting batter. If you cannot command the inner portion of the zone, you're risking the most obvious thing ever. The sinker is going to run to the barrel if they're already on your fastball timing because it's a similar velo pitch. Rather than jamming a guy, you're now giving up a double in the gap or a home run over the wall because you threw the ball to the batter's barrel. Chase Burns threw 1 total sinker to righties. Sinkers are always, in my personal opinion, and statistically if you really look, going to be more effective to same-side batters. Burns has the unique advantage here, if he can start to get comfortable and command a sinker to righties, of the fact that his high-ride fastball is already a problem at the top of the zone. He can break something off that's the same velo and starts out of his hand like the high-ride fastball at the exact same spot, but dives 8 more inches into your hand because on average, he was getting 12 inches of run on the sinker last year when he did throw it. He gets on average 4 inches of run on his 4-seam fastball. You've now created an absolutely diabolical combo. I think, Flax, that's the answer to long-term success for him. Caveat here for everybody. We don't know Chase Burns. We don't get to train with Chase Burns, and we don't know how he feels about any of this. This is just us looking at data numbers and saying this could definitely help, and everybody else is going to do something similar. It's why teams like the Red Sox believe everybody can just throw a cutter. Call it what it is. However, we bring this up because if we changed an arsenal and he could get consistent with this, 4-seam fastball, sinker, slider, split to both sides, you're talking about a full arsenal, a guy who now you have to worry about 4 pitches no matter who you are, and he's got devastatingly good stuff across the board. And I'm just factoring in the fact that if this guy throws a splitter, it's probably gonna be gross. Just what it is.
And let's talk about why it's important that he adds more pitches, right? Because his career splits between lefties and righties are a stark difference. Lefties have a 346 career WOBA, 451 slug against him. 9 of the 12 home runs he's given up at the big league level have come against lefties. On the flip side, righties have a 206 WOBA, a 266 slug against him. what he has done this year and why it feels like he could be more in a Cy Young conversation is that the numbers against lefties have gotten better. Not insanely better, but better enough that in a lineup that's got, 6 righties and 3 lefties, he's going to dominate and maybe get beat by one of those 3 lefties the way the numbers are right now. His strikeout rate is up against lefties. It's even better against lefties than it is against righties, which was completely flipped last year. And so you're starting to see a guy who's understanding how to attack hitters on both sides of the plate a little differently. You're starting to see him just get smarter. That's what it takes for him to become a Cy Young pitcher. And I'm talking about this season. How does he take the next step this season and continue what he's doing to potentially put himself in that conversation that's going to almost guarantee include Christopher Sanchez and Paul Skeens? Because it can't just be a 2-horse race if a guy like Chase Burns exists.
Yeah, I'm excited to see what he does. If he's not throwing a second fastball starting sometime in 2027, fingers crossed, potentially 2028, depending on what happens with the CBA, I would be shocked. Now, the flip side is,
Right.
the only thing I'm going to say before we move on to the Cubs here, if you give Chase Burns 2 years to do nothing but figure out a second fastball, I'm kind of afraid of what that's going to be. And that's great for Cincinnati on the flip side. So, it's fun, Flax. I love to see him throwing so well. He diced up my Nats, who, by the way, have scored the most runs in baseball. So let's not act like that's not an offense that's scary.
Not an easy thing to do.
Beat the Braves again today.
That they did. The only other thing I want to bring up about Chase Burns and why I think he is such an elite level pitcher, and this is what the best do, they get better when the situation gets tougher. In his career specifically, medium leverage, high leverage situations, hitters are hitting below 215. They're posting a below 270 WOBA. He strikes out way more than he walks. And that's across 62 innings. In 2026 alone, those numbers are far better. Hitters are hitting below 170, below a 210 WOBA, slugging below a 220, 225 rate. He's struck out 42 guys in a 60 or in a 37 pitch stream in those situations. When it gets tougher, he gets better. That's what makes a Cy Young pitcher, because that's how those guys go 6 innings, 7 innings consistently. That's how managers, even old school guys like Tito, let guys like Burns go a little bit longer. That's how they learn how to throw 105 pitches an outing instead of 90 pitches an outing, because they can't get through a lineup a third time.
To your credit there, too, old school guys like Tito, they don't need stats to tell them how good a guy is in high leverage situations, which is what makes guys like that so much more elevated on your bench, helping your pitchers going deep into games. Tito could have told you that Chase Burns was that high leverage guy. It's nice that we have statistics to continue to let us know that when the game's on the line, Chase Burns is a guy that you want in there, maybe even instead of going to the bullpen 1 inning earlier. Flax, the Cubs are on a roller coaster ride this year. They've been at Hershey Park this entire season, is what it feels like, riding whichever roller coaster you most enjoyed there when you were growing up as a kid. They are 29-23. They are 3rd in the NL Central, which, by the way, seems to be the toughest division in baseball. Who would have known? This team has already had 2 10-game winning streaks, Flax. So I want to remind you, they are 29-23. So they have 2 winning streaks that are worth 20 of those wins. And they are 29-23. We should be looking at a team that's won 35 games in a scenario of this nature when you have the roster that the Chicago Cubs have. They've comboed those 2 10-game winning streaks with a 3-game losing streak, a 6-game losing streak, and the current 4-game losing streak they are on as of today. The volatility has been crazy with a very, very good Cubs roster. So the question here is simple. Why are we seeing this volatility? And do the Cubs have the capability and ability to right the ship, steady the ship, and get back to the top of the NL Central?
I want to say this real quick. You said Hershey Park. We're talking about the Chicago Cubs. We could have just said Pier Park
That's on me.
at the Navy Pier.
That's on
in
me.
Chicago.
That's on me. I haven't been to that one. I've
not
been to
your
Hershey, though.
not your forte, not your realm. That's okay. I just thought I want to make sure that any Cubs fans listening to this didn't think that we were just like situating them in Hershey, Pennsylvania.
Sorry.
I also love that like you skip Busch Gardens, Six Flags, you went to Hershey Park, which is
That's where
fantastic.
I grew up going. So that was the first thing that came to my head.
I'm not a big amusement park guy as it is, so you can have that one.
I will. Go ahead. Tell us more about the Cubs.
Yeah, it's hard because their trends have followed the trends of how individual guys are hitting, right? It's either everyone's going or no one's going. And in some cases, it's either, no one's going and no one's going in certain spots across the field. One area you notably mentioned was the infield across the board. Bregman, Swanson, Horner, Bush. It's basically the same four, night in, night out, or day in, day out, considering Chicago Cubs play a lot of day games. The guy leading the group in OPS is Nico Horner, and that can't happen. I love Nico Horner. Nico Horner should not be leading that group in OP. In a group that includes Alex Bregman and Michael Bush, Nico Horner should not be leading that group in OPS.
Frankly, it's not his game.
No, he should be leading in runs scored because he should be on base when those guys are hitting home runs. Dansby's been a little lost at the plate like the last 3 years. This isn't new.
Sure.
It's worse than it's ever been. I'm not quite sure why. I'm more than likely going to take this and look into it because now I'm curious. But, across the board, when you take a 9-man lineup and 4 of your guys are this, and then the rest is PCA struggling, Seiya is not the Seiya that he was for the first half last year. Moises Ballesteros, who is on his own roller coaster ride, isn't getting consistent at-bats, which is not making that any easier, right? You got probably 3 or 4 guys who are kind of in a carousel in that lineup. There's not a lot of stability in what the day-to-day looks like when those guys are showing up to the ballpark, except for the guys that are really hitting the worst, which is crazy to say. Just kind of riding a hot bat like a Michael Conforto.
And we both know that's not why they brought Conforto in reality.
No.
He wasn't meant to be that type of guy. I equate it to the fact that MJ Melendez was hitting 4th for the Mets for a month of this year. It's just what it is at the end of the day.
Yeah, it's not a shot at these guys. It's
No.
just relative to the lineups that these two groups have put together in their roster construction. I would say that neither of these GMs in those situations would have expected that was who was hitting 4th.
That wasn't what the roster construction.
That wasn't
meant
the
to be.
plan.
It's great that it's happening because both of those teams, in the Mets and the Cubs in this scenario, we'll go away from the Mets here, but they needed a bat and somebody showed up. Right? It didn't matter what the name was at that point. When we get into the regular season of Major League Baseball, whoever helps you win games is what matters, right? It's, again, let's not go on that tangent. But you brought up Moises Ballesteros. There's no other way to put this than the fact that in April, in March, he couldn't hit the broadside of the barn. In April, he could only hit the ball out of the park. And in May, he's been an automatic out. That's really difficult because the production that they were getting from him in April was really helping steady and right the ship. The other piece that we have to talk about here is that, unfortunately, the starting rotation isn't doing much as to fool anybody at the current moment, right? Edward Cabrera was brought in. His stuff doesn't look bad, but guys are hitting 262 off of him. Colin Ray, guys are hitting 268 off of him. Tyon, 244. Matthew Boyd, who I believe is hurt at this point, 266. 3 out of 4 of these guys are giving up career highs in pull air rate. All the analytical heads out here will tell you that is basically the worst thing that could be happening at the current moment because the home run rate is going to skyrocket. All 4 of these guys, in the most interesting stat of the day, in my opinion, have negative run values on everything, on their fastballs. You can't do that. You can't do that, right? Your fastball has to be a pitch that can set everything up. A guy like Edward Cabrera as well, who Edward Cabrera has had an elite fastball his entire career. I don't know what you do here. The funny part about that statement, though, is we have a positive run value on breaking balls and off speed for all of these guys, which tells me one singular thing, Flax, which I think is super interesting here. It's the fact that the Cubs are really, really good with guys who don't throw hard. That's how they develop as well. Edward Cabrera is showing us that there is no difference in that overall statement, even with a high-octane fastball. I really think, Flax, that we are in a way seeing a developmental shortcoming for the Chicago Cubs within that spread from an analytics perspective. They've had one type of pitcher in their competitive window for so long, and when you look at who they've also developed, it makes sense, right? Justin Steele is a great example, right? It's a guy who they've missed because he's been hurt. But Justin Steele, Shota Imanaga, who, by the way, is the one guy in that rotation who is really settling things down. He's averaging 6 innings per start. He's been solid enough. He keeps them in games. He goes deep enough in games. But we can't have a situation like this where 4 out of the 5 guys in your rotation have a fastball that just gets blasted left and right. All of these guys' fastballs are getting hit at a higher than 300 average at the current moment. You can't succeed with that being the case.
Well, and the only other guy I'd throw in there is Ben Brown. And the hard part about Ben Brown, and we had kind of talked about this earlier in the year, is that he lives in that swingman role. Because of the injuries that they've had, they took him out of a role that he was excelling in, right? He had 12 different innings or 12 different outings out of the bullpen. And out of the bullpen up until May 4th, he was phenomenal. He was everything you would have wanted him to be out of the bullpen with a 2.10 ERA. He was striking guys out. He had gotten a save in there. He had a couple of holds, 24 strikeouts to only 8 walks. He was doing what you would want in that situation. And his fastball not getting hit to oblivion, right? Leveraging a good knuckle curveball, leveraging a sinker, a 3-pitch arsenal with a new sinker, hard and heavy on the right-handed hitters, working really well. But then you have to put him into a starting role because everyone's hurt. Well, you put him into a starting role, he makes 3 starts, and the first 2 were fine, but he's only throwing 4 innings because you're only letting him go through the order twice. How much use is that? And then he throws 5 against Milwaukee, gives up 3 runs, but as an offense right now and what you're putting together, you don't have enough to combat that, and you lose. And you don't have Ben Brown to come in after Ben Brown and keep the game afloat so that your offense can stay in the game. So not only did you move him to a role, and whether he's successful in it or not, you lost him in a role that he was uber successful in.
Especially on the fact, too, that they were utilizing him in high leverage even within the swingman role, right?
Yeah.
When you've got the guy who comes in as the immediate stopper for the starter to steady the ship, right? Listen, people forget that that's where Andrew Miller's role started a very, very long time ago for him in the bullpen, right? He was, at the beginning of it, the guy that you brought out when 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 were coming up the next inning in whatever order you want those numbers, and you brought Andrew Miller out there to ravage the middle of their lineup, and then you bring in your high leverage arms who now are going to feast off the rest of the lineup. So
Right.
I think it's tough. Now, Flax, I want to flip over to the saving graces right now for the Cubs. And the first one is the fact that they're walking more than anybody in baseball. So they're finding guys on base, which is huge here. They're third in all of baseball in on-base percentage, regardless of how well they've swung the bat because of these walks. And though this may not be a 100% precise stat because it is a very hard stat to find, they're scoring about 40% of their runs at the current moment off of the long ball. If these guys were not walking at the highest rate in baseball, that's a lot of solo home runs and quite a few less wins. We know it's the case.
Well, and you know, across the board, there's not a lot else that they're doing. Like, they're not stealing bases at a super high rate. I remember early in the season when they weren't hitting home runs, every highlight of runs scored that they had was like man on third, less than 2 outs, and it would just be like a ground ball to the second baseman. Like, oh, Cubs scored again. And that's great, right? Like
Manufacturing runs, to be fair.
You have to be able to manufacture runs. You can't live and die by the long ball. But if you're not, getting yourself from base to base, then you require doubles to get yourself over to third base with less than 2 outs. Or you require singles with a man on second, right? You want to look at what some of their different splits are as a team, and it'll either tell you why they're really good or why they have struggled in a lot of different ways, right? Look at a team like them with 2 outs offensively. As a team with 2 outs, they're not very good at hitting. And they don't have to be hitting 350, but when you're hitting around the Mendoza line and you're one of the worst teams in baseball in a situation that you're going to find yourself in 8 to 9 times a game, definitively, you have to get better at it. You have to put the ball in play a little bit more. You have to strike out a whole lot less. And they're not doing those things. Those are little things that win ball games.
The final note before we go to can and how do the Cubs steady this ship here is they're right now smack dab in the middle of the league when it comes to innings thrown by their bullpen at 191.2. They're literally ranked 15th for the sake of it. It's smack dab in the middle. With the injuries and with the fact that Brown has been pushed into a starting role, that becomes a scarier proposition because you do need more length from 3 of the 4 other names due to an injury that we mentioned. They have to have it, right? Yep. Because the other thing that Ben Brown was doing was throwing multi-inning outings out of your pen. So it'll be very interesting to see how that affects them. Could be a positive, could be a negative if guys like Edward Cabrera, Colin Ray, and Jamison Tyone can get their average game started innings closer towards 6 innings per game. Flex, I'm going to just walk right into it. I think the Cubs absolutely can steady the ship. I don't think there's a question of it. We've seen the flashes already. This roster is full of guys who, in reality, have been somewhat perennial all-stars. The offense has the ability. The rotation has the ability. The funny thing is I'm not going to sit here and tell you what the answer to the question is because we just went through all the things that were wrong, right? Fact of the matter is they have to turn around and execute more like they did in April and less like they have in May. Ian Happ has tried. I got to give Ian Happ a lot of credit. This is a guy who has been given a boatload of crap his entire career by a lot of people. Switch hitter, always shows up, plays more than good enough defense, and he's the one guy that generally is just finding a way. And he's been doing that of recent as well. So they're going to need to find some more offense around him. Michael Busch, to me, he's the key that needs to turn here. Michael Busch has the ability before the end of the year to still find himself at 30 home runs, no problem at all.
Yeah.
He's an insanely good athlete at first base. I need to see Michael Busch turn it on, and I need to see the offense follow.
I saw a tweet from Buster Olney today. It said, Ian Happ is on pace to finish the season with an unusual set of numbers. 32 home runs, 111 runs, 114 walks, 232 strikeouts. He has a 214, 350, 429 slash line. Listen, Ian Happ is playing the game of long ball or die. And it is, for the most part, been pretty helpful for this team, while also playing a solid defense in left field, right? I mean, it's a tough outfield to play in with the wind, with the weird cutouts down the lines in Chicago. Yep. But across the board, Ian Happ is who the Cubs need him to be. He's a steady guy in the clubhouse. He's a steady presence in the lineup. He takes solid at-bats until he doesn't, in which he strikes out an egregious amount. But it's not like he's doing anything different than anybody else has been doing.
Listen, and more productive.
Well, right. At least he's productive when he gets it in play.
Correct.
Right? I mean, the slug and the on base are at least there. I think it's crazy to think that a team of this talent that's already 5 games over 500 isn't going to either hit another hot streak and keep themselves moving. Whether or not they compete in the postseason is going to be whether or not they are hot at the time. I also think that a manager like Craig Counsell is also smart enough to understand how to clean things up, right? When you start looking at the way this season has gone, I don't think that he'd tell you he's happy. I think he'd rather be 29-23 with a steady dose of winning series, but not necessarily winning 10 games in a row. Because the highs and lows of a game of baseball need to be closer to each other than further apart. The higher the highs are, the lower the lows are that come after it. And you're seeing it with a team like the Cubs. It takes doing the situational things right? Separating yourself defensively. Dansby and PCA already do it, but is the rest of the team doing it? Separating yourself at the plate. Are you an easy out or are you a tough out? Are you making pitchers work? Are you working hard to get pitchers out of the game in the 5th inning instead of the 6th or the 7th? There's a lot of games that they won that were close games, and they were a lot of late, tight games against their division during their last 10-game win streak. And then you started to see the pieces of those cracks fall.
Yeah.
How do they find something more sustainable? Like I said, start doing the little things correct. I think you could say that about a lot of teams in baseball right now.
Yeah, and let's throw out there too. We didn't talk about him a ton. PCA's just got to find a way on base. I really genuinely, I'll say it with my chest, like I don't need PCA to be a 30 home run guy.
Nope.
I need PCA to be a 15 home run guy and have a 380 on base percentage. He's got a 310 on base percentage, which is the second worst on their team by any qualified hitter at the current moment, and he's still stolen 12 bases, which puts him tied for 9th in Major League Baseball in stolen bases. The dude's a walking triple, not even a double. The dude's a walking triple when he gets on base. Like, we need to have a recognition of that because that is actually way more effective than an extra 10 solo home runs at the end of the day, because they have a lineup that as they get heated and hot will end up knocking him in every time.
He needs to be what he is, which is a better version of Chandler Simpson. And that is no shade to Chandler Simpson, because Chandler Simpson is exactly what I love watching in baseball. Guys who are so highly skilled in a couple of things that elevate them to the level of elite company at the big league level. PCA can do what Chandler Simpson does with the propensity for more power and the propensity for even better defense.
He has PCA staying within himself is probably a 20-20-60 guy, straight up with the stolen bases, 20 doubles, 20 home runs, 60 stolen bases. If he did that for the rest of his career or the rest of his tenure with the Cubs, I would hope he would be excited about that too, because that's the capability he has at the end of the day. Also, shout out to Jake Mangum, because he is that type of guy as well. He's just got to be shouted out every time.
Yeah. I mean, why not?
I love it. So the answer, ladies and gentlemen, is absolutely the Cubs can right the ship. We expect them to continue to right the ship. At 29 and 23, you wouldn't realize that they have this type of stuff going on internally, but they do. So something to look at as you move through your Memorial Day week. Flax, short episode this week on a holiday. Final thoughts from you.
Well, while we're recording, Denison is currently playing Game 2 of a Super Regional, trying to win Game 2 as they already won Game 1 to go to the College World Series for the second straight year. So hopefully next week when we come back to the table, Denison is playing in Eastlake, Ohio. That's all I really got this week.
I love it. With no This Week in Baseball Flax, I needed to call out America's utility man, Ernie Clement. He's hot again. 467 last week, 4 doubles, 1 home run. Dude's a dog. We love Ernie Clement, so just figured Ernie Clement would get a nice little final thought shout out today.
Just one of those guys that plays baseball the right way, works really hard at it, is a little bit undersized, but has that whippiness that just makes him able to do it at that level.
Love it. And plays literally every position on the field. I'm sure you could suit him
it.
up and he'd be like, sure, I got you. No problem at all.
Why not?
Well, guys, thank you so much for hanging out with us. Little short episode for you this week. As always, share the podcast with your friends, Spotify, YouTube, or Apple, wherever you consume podcast content. And of course, come say hi to us on all your favorite socials X, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube Reel, or YouTube Shorts, I'm so sorry, wherever you digest social media content. But as always, have a great